I guess this is where I come clean. No holding back, no sugarcoating. I found out my wife, Sarah, had been seeing other men. And it wasn't some gradual realization, piecing things together over time. No, this hit me like a freight train. At first, I couldn't even wrap my head around the depth of it all. But believe me, the betrayal goes deeper than you could ever imagine. You think you know someone, right? You build a life together, share everything, and then, out of nowhere, everything comes crashing down. Let me rewind a bit. I met Sarah back in college. Back then, she was everything to me. Funny, sharp, ambitious. And her smile, it had this pull, this magnetic thing about it that made you lose track of everything else. We were at some party, one of those chaotic nights where everyone's trying to drink away their worries. She stood out like a beacon. I remember thinking, this is it. She's the one. We clicked instantly, our conversations flowing effortlessly, like we'd known each other forever. We talked about everything, our hopes, our plans, what we wanted from life. It was one of those moments that stick with you, you know? The kind you can't forget. Fast forward a few years, and we got married. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a small ceremony. I never cared much for the big wedding fuss, and neither did she. At least that's what I thought. Things were good for a while, but I'm not sure when it all started to shift. Looking back now, though, there were signs. They say hindsight's 20/20ths, right? It started small, late nights at work, more girls' nights out. Suddenly, she had all these new friends I'd never met. The first few times, I didn't think anything of it. She was ambitious, and her job as a project manager kept her busy. But then, she started coming home more and more often drunk. That was strange because Sarah wasn't really a drinker, at least not before. I'd ask her about it, and she'd brush it off, work stress, or just a rough night. At first, I wanted to believe her. But when you're lying in bed, night after night, waiting for the person who used to be excited to come home, and now she's stumbling in at 2 or 3 a.m., smelling of booze and who knows what else, you start questioning things. You start snooping, because what else can you do when your gut's telling you something's not right? But she kept telling me it was all in my head. Then I'd see her texting late at night, laughing at messages and quickly hiding her phone when I'd walk into the room. She'd say it was just the girls, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. There was this nagging feeling at the back of my mind, one that kept me up at night, wondering what was really going on. When the person you thought you knew inside out starts to feel like a stranger, it messes with your head. One night, after another late night out with her friends, she passed out. This time, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm not proud of it, but I grabbed her phone. The thing is, she never let me touch it before. She always had some excuse, work stuff, confidential projects. But I'd figured out her passcode weeks ago. I just hadn't had the guts to check it until that night. And yeah, I knew I was crossing a line, but at that moment, I didn't care. I needed answers. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the phone. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary, just some harmless group chats with her friends, a few work messages. But then I saw a name I didn't recognize, Jack. And then another one, Michael. I figured, okay, maybe they were just co-workers. But as I kept scrolling, my stomach dropped. Photos. Videos. I can't even begin to describe that feeling. My chest felt like it was caving in as I looked through them. It wasn't just one guy. There were multiple men, multiple. And these weren't innocent selfies or flirty texts. No, these were full-blown videos of her at some party. A party I sure as hell wasn't invited to. Doing things with these guys that I never thought she'd be into. I thought I knew her. Turns out, I was completely wrong. Each new image felt like a fresh stab to the heart. By the time I put the phone down, I was shaking so hard I thought I might throw up. I looked over at her, passed out, as if nothing was wrong, while my whole world was crumbling. I didn't wake her up. I couldn't. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. How did we get here? Was it my fault? Had I pushed her into this? Was I really so oblivious that I couldn't see it coming? Or had she always been like this, and I just chose to ignore it because I wanted to believe in the life we'd built together? The thing is, once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. It changes everything. The anger starts slow, a smoldering fire in your chest. But before long, it consumes you. I wanted to confront her, wanted to scream, break something, anything, but I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that fight. Instead, I spent the rest of the night trying to figure out what I was going to do next. People always say revenge isn't worth it, that it won't make you feel any better. But honestly, those people don't know what they're talking about. After finding out what Sarah had been doing behind my back, the only thing that kept me from losing my mind was the thought of getting back at her. And it had to be personal. It wasn't enough to just leave her or expose her. No, I wanted her to feel that same gut-wrenching pain. The one you feel when you realize everything you trusted was a lie. That's when the idea of Linda popped into my head. Yeah, Sarah's mom, Linda. She had, well, let's just say she aged like fine wine. She was still married to Sarah's dad, but their marriage had been on the rocks for a while. Sarah mentioned it almost offhand one evening. Something about her marriage to her dad no longer being real, just a routine they stuck to for appearances. Perfect. It was subtle at first, like a slow burn, but I could feel the wheels turning. I knew I needed to take my time with this. Linda wasn't naive. She had been around the block, dealt with her own share of struggles, and I couldn't afford to rush anything or make her feel cornered. So, I started playing the role of the supportive son-in-law. Nothing too flashy, just enough to keep things casual while I quietly worked my angle. We'd meet for family dinners, just casual chats, nothing that raised any suspicion. I'd offer to help her with little things around the house. Occasionally, we'd grab coffee and talk about how tough things had been for both of us, how we both had our own burdens to bear. And, of course, I played the part of the devastated husband to perfection. I dropped small mentions about my troubles with Sarah, how distant we had become, how I didn't know where our marriage was headed. Linda, being the empathetic type, soaked it all up. She started talking about her issues with Sarah's dad, how she felt neglected, how she had been lonely for years. It was like clockwork. The more she confided in me, the closer we became. And then, one night, the moment presented itself. I casually suggested we have dinner, just the two of us. No big deal, right? She'd been my confidant for months, and I was grateful for her listening ear. We went to a quiet, intimate place, and I could see the way she lit up. She was flattered. At first, I kept things light, kept the conversation flowing easily. But as the wine poured, the atmosphere shifted. She started talking about how trapped she felt in her marriage, how she missed feeling desired. That's when I saw my chance. I leaned in, and I'll never forget the way her eyes softened when I brushed her hand. Just a gentle touch. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned in a little closer herself. It was too easy. After another drink or two, I suggested we go back to her place. I kept it casual, like it was just another night. But inside, I was boiling with anticipation and frustration. This was my moment. When we got to her place, things took off quickly. A few more drinks, a couple lingering touches, and we were sitting on the couch talking. The conversation wasn't light or friendly. It was heavy, filled with the weight of years of frustration and unmet expectations. Was it to get back at Sarah? Hell yeah. And that made it feel all the sweeter. Every word, every look, it was all part of the plan. I wasn't sure if Linda even realized what she was doing. Maybe she did. Maybe she wanted it just as much as I did. Either way, that night, I got exactly what I came for. We ended up in her room, and while I won't go into specifics, I can say that in that moment, my need for closure was overwhelming. It felt like I was finally in control of something, even if just for that brief moment. The next morning, Linda acted like it was all some big secret. She kept going on about how no one could find out, how it shouldn't have happened. But honestly, I didn't care about her guilt. I wasn't concerned with how she felt. For me, this was just step one of my plan. A few days later, I knew it was time to drop the bomb on Sarah. I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. No sateliti. I wanted her to feel the full impact of what had happened. So, one evening, we sat at the kitchen table like any other night after work. She was on her phone, probably texting one of her friends from those parties she'd been going to. I had to force myself not to snap and throw her phone across the room. Instead, I leaned back, trying to stay calm, and said, "I slept with your mother." You know that moment when everything just breaks? When you see someone's entire world crumble? I saw it happen right in front of me. Sarah froze, her eyes going wide like she couldn't even comprehend what I'd just said. She stammered, trying to process it. "What? No, you're lying." I smiled coldly. "Oh, I'm not. We had dinner, a few drinks, and then, well, you know how these things go. I could see the anger bubbling up inside her. She wanted to explode, to scream, but she was too stunned to react. I pressed on, twisting the knife. If you want the details, I'm happy to share. That was the tipping point. She jumped up from the table, her face red with fury. "You're disgusting," she yelled, her voice cracking. "How could you do that? My mother? You're sick." I stood up slowly, leaning over the table, looking her in the eye. "Am I?" I shot back. "What about you, Sarah? How many guys have you been with behind my back? You think I don't know about those parties? Really? Who's the sick one here?" The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by her shaky breathing. She knew I wasn't bluffing. For the first time, I saw something I hadn't before: fear in her eyes. She tried to speak, but no words came out. I didn't give her the chance to recover. "Yes, Sarah, I know everything. Every disgusting detail. And guess what? Your mother. She's better than you." That was the final straw. She snapped. She threw her phone at me, screaming every insult she could think of. But I just stood there, cool and collected, as she lost her mind. This was what I wanted. I wanted her to feel that same humiliation, that same sting of betrayal. As she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. It wasn't pretty, but after everything she'd done, it felt right. When the dust settled, I knew what I had to do next. Divorce? That wasn't even a question. There was no way I could stay married to someone like Sarah, not after everything I had found out, not after what I had done. This whole marriage had been a farce for God knows how long. And now it was time to burn it all down. But I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. No, I had something far better: evidence. Concrete, damning evidence. And I was going to make damn sure she never forgot what she had done to me. The first step? Getting a lawyer. But not just any lawyer. I needed someone who wouldn't hesitate. Someone who'd go straight for the jugular. So I found him. Victor. A pit bull of a divorce attorney. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He just wanted to see what I had. So I handed him everything. The videos, the photos, every piece of evidence I'd gathered from her phone. I'll never forget the look on his face when he opened those files. He paused for a moment, then said, "I think we've got more than enough to bury her." And that's exactly what we did. Filing for divorce? It wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be, but it was necessary. I wanted out, but I wasn't just going to walk away with nothing. I wanted to take as much as I could with me. So we compiled everything. Every video, every text, every receipt that showed Sarah's double life. At this point, revenge wasn't enough for me. I wasn't just looking for payback. No, I was aiming for destruction. I wanted her humiliated, to lose everything she thought she could hide behind. When the court proceedings started, it felt like stepping into an arena. Sarah showed up looking like she hadn't slept in days. Probably because she knew what was coming. But I didn't care. She had done this to herself. She had the nerve to act like she was the innocent one. Like she hadn't been caught red-handed, cheating behind my back with multiple guys. She sat there with her lawyer, some sleazy guy trying to paint her as the victim. He claimed our marriage had just fallen apart over time, that she'd made mistakes. Yeah, no kidding. But those weren't just mistakes. Those were choices. Over and over again. The tension in that courtroom was thick. Every time her lawyer tried to spin some sob story, I could see the judge's face. He wasn't buying it. Not with the evidence I had. When it was my turn, I made sure the videos were shown in full view of everyone in that room. I wanted everyone to see who Sarah really was, not the innocent wife she was trying to pretend to be. And trust me, it was a show. Sarah sat there, pale as a ghost, as the videos played. The sounds, the images, there was no denying what she'd done. I'll never forget the look of horror on her face as everyone watched. It was priceless. Her lawyer tried to object, said it was too personal, too irrelevant. But the judge didn't stop it. He let it all play out second by second. By the time the video ended, Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. She knew there was no escape now. I testified, of course. I laid it all out. Every late night, every lie, every moment I knew something was off. I told them how I discovered everything, how I confronted her, and how she had the nerve to deny it all at first. And through it all, Sarah just sat there, her face to the floor, unable to look at me. The court battle dragged on longer than I expected, with her lawyer trying every trick in the book to spin her as the victim. But the evidence was irrefutable. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I got the house, the bulk of our assets, and a clean break from the woman who had ruined my life. It was a win, sure, but it didn't feel like the victory I thought it would. Maybe because deep down, I knew I could do more. That's when I decided to take it further. You see, a court ruling wasn't enough. I wanted the world to know who Sarah really was. I wanted her to feel the same chaos and destruction that she had brought into my life. So, after the ruling, I took those videos, the ones from her phone, and uploaded them to an anonymous website. Don't ask me which one. It was one of those shady, backdoor sites where people post all sorts of messed up stuff. And within hours, the videos were everywhere. I sat back and watched it unfold. The views climbing, the comments pouring in. A strange sense of satisfaction washed over me. Sarah had no idea what was coming. She had no clue that her secrets were now out for the entire world to see. And that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted her to feel that deep humiliation, that loss of control. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Whispers among mutual friends. Posts online. People were talking. And before long, Sarah's reputation was shot. Her word didn't mean anything anymore. Turns out being a project manager and starring in group party videos don't mix so well. I didn't need to do anything else. Her life unraveled on its own. People started distancing themselves from her. She lost her job. Even the people from those parties she'd been so close to didn't want anything to do with her anymore. And you know what? I didn't feel a shred of guilt. Not even a little. She had it coming. Every single bit of it. That night, as I watched the fallout unfold, I slept better than I had in months. There was something almost peaceful about knowing she had finally gotten what she deserved. I didn't care if it made me a bad person. At that point, I had stopped caring about a lot of things. All I cared about was making sure she paid. And she did. In full. After everything, the court battle, the videos, the fallout, I knew it was time to get my life back on track. You can only stay in revenge mode for so long before it starts eating away at you. So I made a decision. It was time to rebuild. Time to focus on me for once. No more dwelling on Sarah. No more letting the past control me. I wanted to move on, even if I wasn't sure how to make that happen. The first thing I did was start exercising. I'd never been the gym type, but I needed an outlet, something to release the anger and frustration that had built up. Every morning, I'd hit the treadmill, running like I was trying to outrun the thoughts that kept chasing me. At first, it was just a way to get through the day without feeling like I was about to snap. But over time, it became more than that. I started enjoying it. I pushed myself harder, lifting weights, running longer distances. And you know what? It worked. Physically, I felt better, stronger, like I had control of something again. And that's a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. Then I started doing things I hadn't in years, visiting new places, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned during my marriage. Photography, for one. I'd always loved it, but Sarah wasn't into it, so I let it fade away. Now, I had all the time in the world, so I dusted off my old camera and started taking weekend trips, snapping photos wherever I went. Sometimes, I'd drive without a plan, just stopping wherever caught my eye. I'd take pictures of landscapes, people, and random moments. It felt like rediscovering a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. But no matter how much I tried to fill my days with new experiences, the past still lingered. At night, when the world quieted down, my mind would drift back to Sarah. I'd replay the good times in my head, those moments when we were happy. It wasn't all bad. We had real moments, genuine memories where I thought we had it all. And that's the hardest part, the part that still haunts me. It wasn't all lies and betrayal from the start. I loved her once. I thought she was my forever. But now, all those moments are tainted by what she did, by the deception, by the betrayal. Sometimes, I'd lie awake, wondering how things could have been different. What if I had caught on sooner? What if I'd been a better husband? But those thoughts, they're poison. You can't change the past, no matter how many times you replay it in your mind. It's like standing in front of a red car, thinking about what might have happened if you'd taken a different route. The crash still happened. You just have to deal with the aftermath. Then, one day at work, I met Sophia. She was new at the office, just come from some marketing firm in another city. At first, we talked about casual work stuff, but soon we started finding common ground. Turns out she was into photography too. We swapped stories about places we'd been, the kinds of shots we liked to take. Talking to her felt easy, safe even, and while I was drawn to her, there was this wall inside me. I couldn't let her all the way in, not yet. I'd been burned too badly. The thought of opening up to someone else terrified me. Every time I thought about letting my guard down, I heard that voice in my head, the one reminding me of what happened with Sarah, that trust is fragile. Once it's broken, it's hard as hell to rebuild. Sophia was patient, though. She didn't push me. We'd hang out after work, sometimes grab a drink or two, just talking about anything and everything. Slowly, I felt myself relaxing around her. I could be myself again without carrying the weight of everything I'd gone through. She wasn't like Sarah. At least, I hope she wasn't. But the fear, the hesitation, it was still there, nagging at me. Through all this, I had one constant, James. My best friend. We'd been through thick and thin together. And after everything with Sarah, he was there for me in ways I didn't even realize I needed. He'd call me up on weekends, drag me out of the house, even when I didn't feel like it. He pushed me to try new things, meet new people, to stop dwelling on the past. I owe him a lot. If it weren't for James, I'd probably still be drowning in bitterness and regret. One night, after a few too many beers, James gave me the talk I didn't want to hear, but absolutely needed. We were sitting at some dive bar watching a game when he looked over at me and said, "Dude, you've got to stop living in the past. Sarah's gone. It's over," he said. "You've got to start thinking about what's next." At first, I shrugged it off, but he wasn't letting it go. "You're a good guy, Jack. You deserve better than to let that bitch ruin the rest of your life. You got to move on. Meet someone new. Live your life." And for the first time in a while, I really thought about what he was saying. He was right. I couldn't keep letting Sarah's betrayal define me. Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it hurt like hell. But I was still here. I was still standing. Maybe it was time to start looking ahead instead of behind me. Sophia and I started hanging out more after that. It wasn't anything serious at first, just friends, just talking. But I could feel the connection building bit by bit. She had this way of making me forget about everything else, even if it was just for a little while. I wasn't ready to dive into anything yet, but for the first time since Sarah, I felt like maybe I could. The fear was still there, though. Trusting someone again? That was a mountain I wasn't sure I could climb. But with Sophia, it was different. She didn't push me. She let me go at my own pace, never expecting more than I was ready to give. That was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Rebuilding trust was harder than I thought it would be. After everything with Sarah, it felt like there was this invisible barrier I couldn't get past. But with Sophia, something felt right. She was patient. She never judged me or pushed me to be something I wasn't. We started opening up more, talking about our pasts, our mistakes, the things that had shaped us. It wasn't easy for me to dig into those parts of my life I'd been trying to bury. But with her, it didn't feel as overwhelming. One night, after work, just the two of us sitting in a quiet corner of a cafe. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but it just spilled out. The whole story, the betrayal, the pain, the court battle, the videos, everything. I expected her to react, to be shocked, maybe even to pull away. Maybe Sophia would look at me differently after hearing everything I'd been through. I couldn't blame her if she did. But she didn't. She just listened. No judgment, no pity, no rush to fix anything. She gave me the space to say it all, nodding occasionally, letting me get it out, as if I were just another person working through some messy chapter of life. And when I finished, she didn't say much at all, but what she did say stopped me cold. "That must have been hell for you." It wasn't a pity statement. No condescensión. Just a quiet recognition of the pain I'd lived through. That was it. No long speech or unsolicited advice. Just pure understanding. And in that moment, something in me shifted. It was like all the weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying started to fall away. I realized that maybe I wasn't the guy defined by the worst thing that ever happened to him. Maybe there was more to me than just the guy who got betrayed. After that, Sophia and I kept growing closer, but it wasn't some whirlwind romance. It was slow, sometimes painfully so. There were days when I'd withdraw, when Sarah's ghost would come flooding back, dragging me down into memories of what I thought I had. It was like trying to wash away a stain that was never going to come out, no matter how much I tried to focus on the present. I find myself lying awake at night, replaying those good memories. The moments when I thought everything was perfect, when I thought she was the one. It was like that part of me, whatever was left, kept getting dragged back into the past. I hated that I couldn't just forget it. I hated that she still had a hold on me. Even now, I wondered if I'd ever be free of her, ever truly move on without dragging that baggage into everything that came after. But Sophia noticed. She always did. She could tell when I was slipping, when the weight of my past started taking over again. "You don't have to go through this alone," she told me one night after I'd been distant for days. "Whatever it is you're feeling, it's okay. Just don't shut me out." Her words didn't just catch me off guard. They pierced through the walls I'd built. I wanted to let her in. I really did. But the idea of opening up to someone again? The thought terrified me. Because letting her in meant facing all the parts of myself I wasn't ready to confront. The anger, the betrayal, the fear that maybe I wasn't capable of love anymore. That maybe, deep down, I was just as broken as Sarah had left me. But I didn't want to be that guy anymore. I didn't want to be the guy who lived in the past, drowning in old wounds, punishing myself for mistakes I couldn't undo. I couldn't keep letting it define me. I knew that if I kept dragging this weight around, I'd never find peace. I'd stay stuck. So I made a choice. I was going to face it. I started seeing a therapist. I'd always thought therapy was for people with real problems, not me. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone to help me untangle the mess in my head, to sort through the chaos I'd been avoiding. And slowly, session by session, I started to understand what had really been holding me back. It wasn't just the betrayal that had messed me up. It was the way I had betrayed myself. I ignored the red flags with Sarah. I pushed aside my instincts because I didn't want to believe that the person I loved could hurt me in that way. And now, with Sophia, I was terrified of making the same mistake. I feared trusting again. Fear that the rug would get pulled out from under me once more, leaving me shattered. But through therapy, I started to see things differently. Trust wasn't about ignoring the risks or pretending everything would be fine. Trust was about understanding that things might go wrong. But that didn't mean they would. It meant being brave enough to try, even when you were scared. But most importantly, it was about trusting myself. Trusting that I'd learned from the past and wouldn't ignore the warning signs again. It wasn't easy. Hell, it still isn't. There are days when those old fears come crawling back, whispering that I'm not good enough for anyone, that maybe I'll screw it all up again. But now, I know how to push those thoughts aside. I know that they don't get to control me anymore. I do. One night, after I'd been feeling off for a few days, I finally opened up to Sophia. I told her about my fears, how I was terrified I couldn't trust again, how I didn't know if I could ever fully open myself up to her. She didn't get angry. She didn't get frustrated. She just listened the way she always did. And when I finished, she didn't offer any grand solution or fix. She just said, "We can figure this out together. It doesn't have to be perfect right away. We'll take it one step at a time." That's when it hit me. I wanted to try. I wanted to let myself love again, even if it scared me. Because at the end of the day, what was the alternative? Staying locked in a prison of fear and bitterness? I'd done that long enough, and it nearly destroyed me. But it wasn't just about Sophia. It was about me. I had to come to terms with everything that had happened. I had to accept my past, every mistake, every heartbreak, and let it go. I wasn't going to carry that weight around anymore. I wasn't going to let Sarah's actions define me any longer. So, I started making plans. Small ones at first, weekend trips with Sophia, talking about the future, about where we saw ourselves in a few years, about the things we wanted out of life. But it was more than just a new chapter. It was the start of something entirely different. A future that wasn't being shaped by my past, but by the person I wanted to become and the life I wanted to live. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the possibility of happiness again. Hitting rock bottom can feel like the end of everything, but the truth is there's nowhere to go but up. And after everything, the betrayal, the divorce, the anger, the resentment, I realized I was finally ready to climb back up. But this time, I wasn't doing it alone. I had Sophia. And for the first time in years, I could actually see a future. A real one. It wasn't some grand, sudden epiphany. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was more gradual, like waking from a long, deep sleep. One day, I just knew. I was ready to move on, to stop letting my past dictate who I was, to embrace the idea of something new with Sophia. She wasn't just someone who helped me get through the tough parts anymore. She'd become someone I wanted to build a life with. And let me tell you, that realization hit harder than anything else. After everything, we started talking more seriously about what the future could look like. It wasn't always easy, not with my hang-ups and scars, but the more we talked, the more I saw we were on the same page. We both wanted the same things: stability, trust, and happiness. But we didn't just stay in the abstract. We got specific. Where did we want to live? How did we see our future together? What did we expect from each other? It was refreshing to find someone who was just as invested in building something real as I was. One night, after one of those long talks about our dreams and our plans, I made a decision. I was ready to commit, not just to Sophia, but to the idea that I could be happy again, that I could have a life filled with hope instead of resentment. I told her, and the relief on her face told me everything I needed to know. I was making the right choice. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about us. We were in this together now, and it felt damn good. I wanted to mark this moment, make it official, like closing the door on my past for good. So, I decided to throw a small dinner. Nothing extravagant, just a few close friends who had been there for me. James, of course, was the first person I invited. Without him, I honestly don't know if I would have made it this far. I owed him that much. At that dinner, I felt lighter than I had in years. We toasted to new beginnings, to letting go of the past, and to stepping into the future. For the first time, I wasn't just going through the motions. I truly believed that I could leave everything that had happened with Sarah behind. I was starting fresh, with a clear mind and a full heart. It felt cathartic, honestly. Saying goodbye to that part of my life wasn't easy, but it was necessary. After the dinner, Sophia and I went for a walk, which had become our thing. We'd walk through the park, no distractions, just talking. But that night felt different. It felt like closure, like I was truly stepping into something new, something that didn't come with any old baggage. We walked side by side, reminiscing about how we met and how far we'd come since then. I told her how much she meant to me, how she had helped me in ways she probably didn't even realize. And as we walked, for the first time in ages, I felt like I could truly breathe. The weight of everything that had come before seemed to lift, and it felt freeing. I looked over at her, and I just knew. This was it. This was the life I wanted, the person I wanted to be with. I wasn't holding on to the anger anymore. I wasn't letting Sarah's shadow loom over me. I had found peace somewhere along the way during that walk. Sophia took my hand, and we kept walking. No words needed to be said. We both understood what this moment meant. It was simple, but it was perfect. It was a quiet, genuine happiness, something I didn't think I'd ever feel again. But here I was walking through the park with the woman I cared about, looking ahead instead of back. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt hopeful. I was ready for whatever came next, because I knew I wasn't alone. It was a new beginning, one I had earned. And for the first time in years, I could honestly say I was excited for the future.